Good morning and welcome to today's Local Government Future Leaders webinar. Today we're very excited to bring an important conversation and discussion for everyone who's dialed in today. Difficult conversations, the art and science of tough discussions. My name is Catherine Carter. I'm the Chief Executive Officer with Local Government Professionals Australia, the national body representing the 200,000 Australians who work for local government across the country. We're webcasting from Canberra, which is Ngunnawal country, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which we're broadcasting today. I acknowledge and respect the Ngunnawal people's continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of this city and the capital region. I also acknowledge and welcome Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be participating today from around the country. The purpose of this webinar series is to share practical work skills tailored especially for women in local government, so we can see more women promoted into leadership positions within the local government sector. This month's skill is how to handle difficult conversations, how to stop avoiding them, and instead how to turn them into something meaningful and constructive. Because our ability to lean into hard conversations ultimately impacts our position and our opportunities as leaders. To tackle this tricky topic, we're extremely fortunate today to be able to be joined by people whisperer, Anneli Blundell. Anneli is a highly sought after and award-winning speaker, author, mentor and leadership expert who makes the complex job of understanding why people do what they do and how to get the best out of them. She makes this topic accessible and entertaining. Today, Anneli is going to touch on and teach us all how to conquer the critical conversation. Anneli, thank you for joining us today and welcome.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm so delighted to be here. And just offline, we were already speaking about how necessary this conversation is. I know it's something that's been curated as part of this initiative for women in local government and how important it is for women in government to be able to have these kinds of conversations. But you and I spoke already at the beginning offline that this is a topic that is important for everyone. For everyone. It doesn't matter what rank you are, what title you have, what industry you are from, male, female, junior, senior, it really doesn't matter. If you're a human on this planet today, you will at some point face up against a critical conversation, a hard, tough, uncomfortable conversation. So if that is you, if you are indeed a human on the end of the line, then I hope that there is much in store for you today. It was a few years ago now that I had one of the toughest conversations I've had in a long time. And it was a strange conversation because it was on behalf of one of my clients. You see, I had been hired by the CEO of this organization to do a round of 360-degree feedback interviews on his team. So we were doing some team building workshops, some team effectiveness facilitated conversations. And as part of that, he wanted each of his team members to get a chance to spend a conversation with me looking at the feedback from the rest of the team. You know, 360-degree feedbacks, it's a profiling exercise where you get feedback from the people that you lead, the people that you work with, and the people who lead you. And my job was to sit with each of the members of the team and go through the feedback with them to really pull out the nuggets about how they could personally be more effective in their roles and therefore contribute to better effectiveness for the group. But this conversation was very different. It was unlike any conversation I'd had in the past. There was a couple of factors that made this particularly difficult. One was I had seen the feedback. The qualitative written comments, the feedback at the end was absolutely brutal. And I'm talking no holds barred. This was straight between the eyes, like really very tough to read. And it wasn't even about me. And it was tough for me to read. Second thing was this person was a deaf person. So I had an interpreter in the room with me. So it added a whole nother layer of complexity in how we would have this really nuanced, really sensitive conversation through a third party. And the third was this poor gentleman, let's call him Phil. It's not his real name, but let's call him Phil, had absolutely no idea that this was coming. None whatsoever. So we're sitting down together. I do the introductory spiel. I warm him into the conversation. We look a little bit at some of the quantitative stuff at the beginning, and then we get to the comments at the end. And I just sit in silence. And I let him read, and I let him absorb. And eventually, when I see his jaw tighten and his fists clench and I see his face go red, I think, okay, I think he's read enough. I think he's got most of the gist of what people are trying to tell him. So very slowly we go through this conversation. How do you feel about this? What does this mean to you? What do you think's going on here? And at first he's really angry. You know, why didn't these people tell me this? Is this what they've been thinking all the time? I've worked in this team for 7 years. No one, not once, not even my manager, has done me the courtesy of telling me this stuff to my face. Why? I'm so angry right now. And we sat with this for a little while because there's a lot to process in this one conversation. And this is the kind of conversation I want us to be able to lean into. And after we had that conversation, he was okay. The color came back to normal. He had made peace with what was in that report, and he had some strategies going forward. And as I exited that room and went straight into the room of the CEO, who was waiting, tentatively waiting for the outcome of that conversation, he said, "How did it go, Anneli? How did it go? Tell me it went well." And I said, You are in trouble, mister. You've been sitting on this feedback for 7 years for this guy and haven't once given him the courtesy of giving this information to him. You haven't trusted him to be able to hold this feedback and do something with it. You and I need to have a critical conversation about how to have a critical conversation. And to be fair, he did what most humans do. We just avoid the hard conversations. I mean, I don't know about you, but, you know, if you've got something really difficult to say to someone, "Hey, oh, Jocelyn, so nice to see you. How are those pies on the weekend? You know, by the way, you're fired." "Okay, then have a great Sunday. Bye." I mean, why are you saying that on a Sunday if you're at work? Anyway, but we never have those conversations. We don't rush in to hard conversations because at a human level, there's something about them that we don't like. And for me, I really wonder if it's about this. Are we prioritizing our comfort over potential conflict? We don't know how they're going to respond. We don't know, just like Phil, we don't know what Phil's going to do with this information. We don't know if he's going to quit, if he's going to create a scene, if he's going to cry, if he'll get angry. We don't know what will happen if we lean into these hard conversations. So we prioritize the comfort of the people around us. We don't want to upset anyone over the potential conflict. But my hypothesis is this, my friends. Are we really prioritizing their comfort? Or are we prioritizing our own comfort? Because I don't know about you, but I don't want to bruise a relationship. I don't want to be disliked. I don't want people saying bad things about me. I don't want to be the cause of someone's upset. I don't want to be in an awkward position where I don't know what to do next. I'm out of my depth. And we've got a poll for you now because I'm really curious of the people we have in the room. How do you respond to a critical conversation? Are you the hoping group? Do you just hope and pray that time will take care of everything and that just within a short amount of time, hopefully, that everything will take care of itself and you won't have to actually have the conversation? Do you hope time will take care of it? Or are you in the hinting category? And hinting is where we lay these little clues and we just hope that the person will pick up these clues. You know, I think about it like being in a conversation with someone and they've got spinach in their teeth. You know the one right here. And we don't say, "Oh, excuse me, you've got some spinach in your teeth." We sort of go, we'll do everything to hint that there's something that needs to be addressed without actually saying the words. Or are you in the third category, and that's the hitting category? So maybe you're not so worried about leaning into these conversations. You're all right to have them, but they're not as elegant as they could be. Maybe you have more of the will, but less of the skill. You know, maybe you're someone that says, oh, Anneli, by the way, I've been meaning to tell you, we've had lots of complaints lately. You're a bit whiffy. You need to get a new BO. It's not working, the current one. So if you could take care of that, that would be terrific. Thanks. So I'm curious, okay, most of you are in the hoping category, yes, followed by the hinting category. If you're not sharing these already, feel free to share them. Brilliant. And some of you are in the, actually, is that right? Hoping it passes, yes. Hitting, that's absolutely. And hinting at the issue. This is, oh, I see, they're moving around. Oh, I see what's happening. Hinting at the issue, perfect. Hitting the topic square on. Wow. So we have a couple of people, we've got several people in the room who just come straight into the conversation. Brilliant. I've got some great tips for you if that's what's happening. Fantastic. Okay, thanks for that poll. Did you know that for the most part, 46% of people would rather look for another job than have a difficult conversation with someone they work with? This is research that came out from a survey in 2012 from Are You OK? It's a workplace relationship study. How are people handling difficult relationships in the workplace? Turns out, not handling them very well at all. I would rather look for another job, thank you very much, than have to have a hard conversation with someone I'm not getting along with. So why are we not willing to confront these conversations? Well, I put it to you that there's a number of things going on. You know, we don't want conflict, like I said before. We really don't want to upset people. We're concerned about bruising or breaking the relationship. We don't know how this person's going to respond. And sometimes we just don't have the capability to have that elegant conversation. As some of you answered in that poll, you just go straight in there, guns are blazing, hoping everything is going to work out well. And sometimes it's because we're uncertain about the outcome. Maybe we're uncertain about the level of permission we have. And I hear this all the time. You know, it's not just a critical conversation you have as the leader of someone in your team, and it's your responsibility, your role to give them critical performance feedback. Well, what if it's not? What if this person is a peer? What if this person is your boss? I can tell you, as you go higher and higher up if you go higher and higher up the food chain, you get less and less unsolicited feedback. People are disinclined to give you feedback, especially critical feedback. And yet it's necessary for growth. And sometimes, a lot of the time, we just wait. We wait and hope and cross our fingers that time will take care of everything and it will resolve itself in due course. But the more we avoid having these conversations, or the less capable we are of having these conversations, the more we think that what we're actually doing here is protecting people. We're protecting them from discomfort. We're protecting them from pain. We're protecting them from potential embarrassment or shame. Nobody wants to made to be look like an idiot. Nobody wants to be Phil, to have that level of deeply disturbing feedback all at once, 7 years worth in one conversation. So we think we're protecting people. But I wonder, are we really helping? There's some wonderful research done by Zenger and Folkman in the US, two management consultants in the US who do a lot of 360-degree feedbacks, thousands and thousands and thousands of feedback conversations they have with their company around the world. So they gather all that data and they draw fabulous conclusions about human behavior. And one of these is this: there's a certain amount of people who believe that your performance improves if you get corrective feedback, critical conversations. Not just nice, lovely, you've done well, thank you very much, but really tough conversation feedback. But I wonder if you know how much. Just think to yourself, would you rather have, give it to me straight, give it to me right between the eyes, give me the truth, or just tell me what you think I want to hear? Give me some nice feedback, make me feel good, or give me some maybe challenging feedback that will make me better. Just have a moment for yourself. Which would you prefer? As it turns out, majority of people would prefer to have that corrective performance feedback. Give it to me straight. I want to know the truth. 72%, in fact. But, and there's a big but to this. Here's the caveat. We only want that level of constructive, corrective feedback if it's delivered in a certain way. It has to be respectful. We have to believe that the person has our best interest at heart, that they've got our back. If we think it's just an opportunity to have a dig or to take us down or to slap us around, then we don't respect that feedback, and then we really feel the sting. So it comes down to this. It's not actually about the message, hard or soft or confronting or awkward or easy. It's about you as the messenger. People are able to hear hard conversations from people that they trust. Are you the person to be trusted with a hard message? Are you the person people go to when they want the truth? I've just had my hair done. What do you think? No, really, what do you really think? Everyone's telling me nice things, but I really want to know the truth. Be honest with me now. Are you that person? Because what I've come to know over the past 15 years of doing this work, working with leaders, working with teams, enterprise-wide, programs around critical conversations, coaching conversations, clear conversations, what I know is the more you are trusted as a professional, the more people are able and willing to hear what you have to say. And this is because trust tempers the sting of the truth. Now, we know that we grow at the boundary of support and challenge. It's not enough just to get praise all the time. It feels good and it lasts for a short amount of time. But in the end, we also need to know things that we need to change or get better at. We need to know what's going on for us. And so let me begin a short rant. If you would indulge me, this is me, Anneli, standing on my soapbox, about to embark on a rant. All right, are you ready? Here I go. Could we please, for the sake of all future humanity and good human beings coming forth on this planet, stop giving children participation certificates? You shouldn't get a medal for participating. No more medals for participating. You win, you lose, you learn, and you carry on. The more we mollycoddle, the more we wrap people up in cotton wool, the more we tell them how amazing and fantastic and perfect they are, the less resilient they become. The harder life will be for them in the end. Imagine a conversation that Phil had to have if you've spent your whole life getting a trophy just for showing up. It's not enough. Okay, rant over. Okay, back to the presentation. So what we know is if we have too much support, people lack resilience. They're not robust to get the right information, to be better humans, better partners, better parents, better professionals. But if we give them too much challenge, too much critical feedback at once, too much hard messaging at once, or the message is too hard, or we don't have enough trust to have that message provided to them, then it's too much of a mountain to climb. They just can't hear it and they won't process it. So we have to find that balance between just enough support and just enough challenge to really be of service to people. And I know that as women in local government, in this Future Leaders series, you have important conversations to have. This is a forum that is part of a greater body, the Local Government Professionals Australia. And as women in government, make no mistake, you've got some critical conversations coming your way if you're not already having them. You just need to turn to the front page of the news. You need to listen to what's going on in the paper. You need to hear reports and parliamentary inquiries and elections coming up. We know there are tough topics right now in the conversations in the dinner table and the workplaces around what's happening in Australia. You are part of these conversations. You have an opportunity to make a difference with your perspective, your experience, your observations and insights. If you are invited to a conversation, you are sitting at the table, don't sit silent for fear of upsetting someone. Don't sit silent because you think it's not a popular message. Don't tell people what they want to hear. Find the courage to have the difficult conversation. Be the person that is going to be able to take the sting out of the truth, because you've got that level of trust with the people in the room. So I want to leave you with 3 hot tips that will hold you in good stead for having these conversations. And at the end, on my final slide, I've also got a QR code for you. So if you scan that code, if you don't have a scanner, I've got the web address at the bottom, and you can pick up some more resources from me as a result of this also. It will put you on my mailing list. You can unsubscribe immediately just to get the resources if you want. But if you want more, some articles, some videos, some book recommendations to take more, to take this to the next step, then please scan that QR code at the end. But 3 hot tips, all right. Tip number 1, slow down. Create space. For those of you who get bull at a gate, run straight into the conversation, hitting people with the message, slow down, take a breath. My daughter right now is doing driving lessons. I don't know if any other parents are experiencing that right now, but it's a little bit, it's testing me. It's testing me. It's very scary. Anyway, so she came back from one of her first driving lessons. Thankfully, I didn't have to do it. We hired a professional instructor for that. But one of her big observations that she came home with was, I never realized that you had to slow down into a corner. Like, I just went careening straight into that corner because I just didn't even think that it was dangerous to head into unknown territory and terrain that was slightly more dangerous than the straight and narrow, that I would have to do something differently and slow down so that I could keep on track and not go off the road. And I thought, isn't that interesting? We do it on the ski slopes. If we've got any skiers in the room, you don't just, well, some of you might, you look at the mountain, you go straight down. Not me. I want to stay alive. I'm not that great at skiing. So I actually want to slow down. So when I'm in danger, I will go slower. I will slow myself down so I can stay in control and leave enough space. And I think about this in terms of the message, you know, the heavier the message, the greater the load we're carrying, the more we want to slow down and acknowledge that moment. Number 2, sit in the discomfort. Be okay with awkward. Be the person who can outlast the other person in service of the importance of this conversation. Don't look to make it better. Don't look to smooth it over. Don't look to wrap them in cotton wool. Let them sit in the discomfort of a hard message that maybe they need to hear after 7 years of not getting that feedback. Don't smooth it over. Let them sit in that moment. But in order to do that, you have to be able to sit in that moment. One of my clients attended my Women at Work program. This is a program to help women increase their presence, visibility, and impact in the workplace, particularly male-dominated environments. And one of the things we talk about is how to have a voice in a meeting, you know, how not to be spoken over, interrupted, and ignored. And this particular client of mine was facing this exact issue. So we encouraged her to have this conversation with her colleague. So remember I said it's not just people that you lead, it's our colleagues, it's our friends, it's our parents, it's our kids. So for her, it was someone who was on the same team as her. It was her peer. So she took him out for coffee, which I would suggest is the right thing to do. Slow down the workplace, be present, raise the conversation. So she shared with him her experiences of having being spoken over and him dominating the conversation. She said, what I've noticed is that the suppliers that we meet with end up paying all their attention to you, all their questions get directed to you, and I become invisible after a while. I may as well not be there. And this is concerning to me. And she didn't get to finish the conversation because the guy she was speaking to got so mad. He got defensive, he got aggressive. He said, I don't believe you. I don't think this is true. You're making this up. And he basically stormed out. So if that was not bad enough, she goes back to the workplace, and for the next 2 days, he gives her the silent treatment. And I don't just mean, you know, just not speaking to her or going, you know, not drawing her into conversation. I mean saying hello and good morning to everyone, skipping over her and continuing with everyone else. Like a very visceral, obvious, I'm ignoring you treatment. First day, she said, this is intolerable. I should never have had that conversation. She gave me a call. She said, this is just too much. I'm just going to go back and I'm going to apologize. And I'm going to say, don't worry about it. Maybe it was just me. And I said, hang on. This is your truth. This is observed by other people. It's not just you. He does it to lots of other people. You know, this is your truth. Stand firm and sit in the discomfort. I promise you it will resolve. Day 2 goes by. Doesn't resolve. Same behavior, same pattern. She rings me again. I said, look, trust me, just sit in the discomfort. Finally, day 3 comes around. He comes up to her in the morning and he says, I want to apologize for my behavior over the last couple of days and for speaking over you in meetings. I've had some time to think about it. I have to say, it wasn't pleasant to hear. It is not the identity I relate to about myself. I feel like I'm also a champion of women and equality in the workplace. So for you to say those things to me was really hard for me to hear. But I took it home after sitting on it for a while and I talked it over with my wife. And she said, darling, I hate to tell you this, but you do have a tendency to dominate the conversation. And you do have a tendency to talk over people. And he said, and I was embarrassed and shocked, to be honest. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't handle that conversation well, and I'm sorry for my behavior, and I promise to do better. So can we have a conversation around how I might better support you in that meeting? Sit in the discomfort. Allow the person to get what they need in that moment. And tip number 3, show up in service. No one's having these conversations just to annoy you, just to make you feel bad or to shame you or embarrass you. If people are taking the time to actually do what they do not want to do, because no one wants to really have these conversations, if they are doing you the courtesy of having the conversation, then pay attention because they're showing up in service of you. And so you can do the same for others. You know, one of the things that shifted the conversation I had with Phil about his 360-degree feedback was something a little left field. He didn't quite get it at first. It was a little bit hard to reconcile in his brain, given everything he just read. But the idea was this. I said, you know, in my experience of doing this, having these conversations, helping people manage difficult feedback, what I've noticed is that if people really don't care about you, they really don't think you have it in you to change and to be better, they won't bother giving you this feedback. So I know it's hard and I know it hurts and it doesn't make sense what I'm saying, that if they care, they will be this hard, but I'm telling you it's the truth. Because if people don't care, they won't even bother. So maybe they're not as elegant as they could be. Maybe they've been waiting too long and sitting on it too long and it's all come out in a rush and it's not delivered in a way that it needs to be for you to be able to absorb it. But I can tell you right now, they're only giving you this feedback because they believe in your ability to do something with it. They're showing up in service of you. So when it comes to critical conversations, they are everywhere. The more you go up in your career, the more you will realize that they don't go away. Often they just get bigger and more important. So it behooves us to spend time cultivating this skill set today. Today is your day. If you haven't been working on this already, there's no time like the present to start. And where do you start? You start with yourself. Because I guarantee you the hardest conversation you'll ever have will be the one you have with yourself. Am I brave enough to give this feedback to my best friend? Am I brave enough to tell my partner that this is no longer working for me? Am I courageous enough to tell my boss that what they're doing is not serving their vision? And if you can say yes to yourself, then you can lean into a critical conversation. And I can guarantee you that no single conversation is guaranteed to change the trajectory of a life, a marriage, a career. But any single conversation can. Thank you.
Anneli, this is so brilliant and so important. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you have with us this morning. To all of those that are, have dialed in for this conversation around the country, this is your opportunity now to ask questions. We do have time available. I have an iPad right here. If you put your questions into the discussion panel, I'll see them as they come in, and I can pass them over to Anneli to respond to. But I have one to start with first, and it goes back to something you were talking about earlier in the conversation, Anneli. Do you need to adjust your communication style or your techniques depending on who you're providing feedback to? So whether is there a difference in providing feedback to a colleague as opposed to a supervisor or your boss? Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. So we always need to adjust our communication style. So the mark of a master communicator is a flexible communicator. So as many humans as we have on the planet, we have listening styles, we have communication styles, leadership styles. So for you to be really effective and for your message to land as you intended, we need to take good care of who's in front of us. You know, we need to ask ourselves the question, how robust is this person? How much do they like critical feedback? How able are they to hear this message? Can they hear this message from me? That's another thing to ask. So, you know, if we think about this idea of people grow at the boundary of support and challenge, you want to understand where this person is on that continuum of support and challenge. Do they need you to go gently, gently? Or do they want you to be more direct? In fact, when I have executive coaching, when I do executive coaching, one of my intake questions is, how do you want me to be as your coach? And I ask that because some people want a lot more affirming. They want more validation. They want more positive feedback. And other people say, I just want you to tell me what my boss won't tell me. I need you to give it to me straight. I need you to challenge me. I really want someone who's going to challenge the integrity of my thinking because I don't get that in the workplace. So I want it from you. I want you to be hard with me.
Thank you. That's really good. Can I ask, is there a gender aspect to this? Does it make a difference as a woman leading and holding these hard discussions with people? Can you expand on that at all? Is it different for women?
Yes, it is different for women on the basis of how we've been conditioned to expect to hear women. So boys and girls are conditioned to communicate in certain ways. So there's ways of behaving that we allow men to do that we don't allow women to do. So for example, men conditioned from boys are expected to be dominant, are expected to be competitive. They can use direct language. They can almost be a little bit abrupt. And we just take it. That's okay, because that's you being decisive and being a good leader. Whereas if women have direct messaging, they're seen as being aggressive, too hard, maybe overly emotional, because women are conditioned to be amenable, to be people pleasers, to be soft, to be liked, to belong, to raise others up and to care and nurture support. And so if we're not being supportive, by bringing a hard, direct message into the conversation, we're violating our gender code. And what that means is there will be a social backlash against how we're showing up. So the man will be seen as authoritative, but the woman will be seen as aggressive. So for women on the line, we need to think really carefully about making sure we are both clear with our messaging and kind with our approach. As Brené Brown says, be clear to be kind.
That's really interesting. There are now a lot of very visible senior women in leadership positions. Is that the behaviour that they're modelling, or are they behaving more like the way that we traditionally expect men to behave, being very direct? And is that supported in the workplace? What are you seeing at those senior leadership levels?
It's interesting because traditionally we would see women taking on more male-oriented behaviors, and you would have, commentary around, well, she only made it because, you know, she acts like a guy or she acts like one of the boys. And, you know, I coach women and they say to me, you know, I want to be successful. I want to be a leader in my career, or I want to reach, you know, director or partner, but I don't want to have to be a man to do it. I don't want to have to change who I am. I don't want to have to be an extrovert if I'm introverted. I want to be authentically myself. But the issue for women is if you're authentically yourself and you're not seen to be warm enough, you're going to incur this backlash. So, you know, Catherine, whether the women are doing it because they're trying to be tough like men that they see, because that's what they expect a leader should be, or they're just doing it because that's their natural style, they'll get a backlash either way. But I mean, we've seen leaders like Jacinda, as an example, have a wonderful demonstration of this firm but fair. You know, she can have a hard message. She can say, you know, she can convey strong messages, but she doesn't seem to lose any of her femininity in the process, which is really fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I agree with that. She is fascinating as a case study, and of course wildly popular around the world, I think, for the way in which she conducts herself and makes quite difficult, firm decisions, as you've said. I've now got a stream of questions coming through, and I'll try to get to all of them as we go round. This one is from Dana Bradshaw. She's asked, or she said, the difference between being assertive and being aggressive can be very difficult for women. Have you got any tips there?
Absolutely. And the reason it's difficult is because it's not up to you, unfortunately. It's up to the perceiver, which makes it really tricky to know what is the line between being assertive and being aggressive when that determination is not up to you. And if it's in the eye of the beholder, who's beholding you in that moment? Because it can change. So in terms of tips, you want to pay attention to the feedback you're getting. If you are constantly being given feedback or being seen to be overly aggressive when you speak in a certain forum, let's say, you know, it's the risk audit committee, and, you know, there's whisperings that you're very aggressive in that meeting, then I would suggest that you ratchet up the warmth. So humans are making a determination about you as a professional based on two social constructs: how warm you are, how likable you are, and how strong you are, how competent you are. So women typically strong, competent, I'm good at my job, I know what I'm doing, and they get judged harshly if they're not showing an equal amount of warmth, because remember, this is part of the gender code for women. So if you are being told you're overly aggressive, I would ratchet up the warmth. Don't ratchet down the aggression, which isn't aggression, it's just directness. And that might be something like softening your speech, it might be small talk, it might be building relationships outside of those committee conversations, it might be smiling more. Humor is a great elevator of these conversations. It's a lovely way to lighten the conversation. It's not always appropriate. And giggles, no giggles, but, you know, a quick quip, if you can think of one, does wonders.
Thank you. There are so many good questions that are coming through now, and I will try to get to all of them. Okay. A related one, I think, to the one we just had. I'm sorry, I don't know who this one's from. Is there a possibility that the recipient may take the direct message as a form of bullying? And I guess, what do you do about that in those circumstances?
Yeah, we have to be really, really careful with this, actually. In today's climate, we also have to be careful with people's mental health right now, in particular, you know, given we've just come through the pandemic and all that sort of stuff. So if you're worried that your direct conversation may be construed as bullying, then I would treat that fear very, very carefully, and I would speak with HR. I would get their advice on it from a legal perspective from your organisation. I would have HR come in the room with you. I would consider who else might be able to give that info or give that feedback or have that conversation that might not be you, if that makes a difference in how the person will receive the information. But be very careful if you're worried about being seen to be bullying, and speak with HR.
No, that's a good one. Thank you. A really good question. I think this is from, and I'm sorry if I can't read all the names correctly. It's come through in a very tiny font, but Cherie Morley. I think this is one from you. She said, where's it gone to? Sorry, it's now. I'm so sorry, I've just lost that one. I'll go to another question and we'll come back to you, Cherie, if that's okay. So someone has written here, it says, I've had feedback when I'm having difficult conversations that I'm being picky or micromanaging the person, but I'm attempting to be direct. I'm struggling with the balance of this kind of conversation. What advice do you have for this person?
Okay, that's a great question. So what's often happening here is there's a mismatch of expectations. So you might have a really high bar for someone, but they might not be ready for it yet. So I was recently asked to give feedback on a colleague of mine who's a professional speaker. As a professional speaker, she asked me to give her some feedback on her speaking. And I asked her, what feedback would you like from me in particular? Because after the presentation, I've been doing this 15 years, I could give her 5 pages of feedback, but it wouldn't be helpful. She's newer in her journey than I am. She may be asking me just about a certain area to focus on. So I need to be really careful that what I want to tell her is something she's ready to receive. So if your level of expectation about what they could be doing different doesn't match theirs, a good strategy is to not go hard with everything you want to tell them, but work out first and foremost, what's the mismatch between the level of expectation. So I might start with a question like this. I'd love to support you in chairing meetings. You know, that's something we've got on the development plan. So you did your first one last week. I'd love to hear, how do you think you went with that? And let them tell you what they need to do differently. And then maybe add 1 or 2 things that you've seen that you really want them to have, but build the trust that they can tell you that they know what they need to focus on, and help them start slowly. And then they'll be more able to hear your full feedback. And you'll also work out what they're willing and able to hear.
Thank you. And I've now, the question from Cherie has come back onto my iPad, and I'm so glad about this one because I think it's one that many women struggle with. I know that I have in the past as well, so it's an important one, I think. She says, do you have any tips on how to control your voice during a difficult conversation so your emotion doesn't influence or impact the intent of the message? What advice do you have? That's a big one for so many of us, emotion. How do you control it?
One word: breathe. Breathe. See, emotion, when we're in a heightened emotional state, we're in a fear response. Our brain is literally hijacked and we lose access to our prefrontal cortex, which is where we do all our intelligent thinking, and we get caught in our emotional state. It makes us unable to see people clearly, hear ideas clearly, come up with good solutions, solve problems, all that kind of stuff. So first of all, we want to just take some calm breaths because we want to reconnect with our thinking brain. We want to reconnect with our heart center, and we want to give ourselves an opportunity to slow down. Remember, if you're really triggered or you're having difficulty controlling your emotional state, then I would suggest maybe that's not the time for the conversation. If you can, take a breather. Go for a 5-minute walk around the block, put your feet in some grass, look up at the sky, take a breath, take a couple of deep breaths, and help the emotion dissipate a little bit. Time is okay if it's in service of you being able to stay in the conversation, not to avoid the conversation.
Oh, I think that's so important. It's something I try to remember for myself, breathe, but also if I have the opportunity, take myself away for a few minutes. You know, if I'm feeling very upset or angry about something and I'm able to take a break, take a walk, recenter myself, breathe while I'm out having that walk, come back and return to it. For me, that really resonates. Thank you very much for that. Another question that's come in. So the person's written this, I'm sorry, I don't know who it is. What tips do you have when you're having a critical conversation with someone who cannot or will not see it not agree to it, but see it enough to discuss it. I might flip that around and say that, so my interpretation of that is that they're talking with you, but they are not accepting what you're saying, or, you know, not agreeing to the points that you're making. What's your advice in that situation?
Yeah, that's a doozy. That's a doozy, right? Because you do all this work, you psych yourself up, you know, you might have a script ready to get the conversation going, and you lean into having this conversation you don't want to have, and they reject it. Like my example with the woman in my Women at Work program, right? No, you're making it up. That's not true. It's not me. I would never do that. It's not who I am. So there's a couple of strategies you can try. One is just to let that be. That may be the best you get. They may not be ready for that message. And, you know, the dynamics of what's going on in the conversation is really important. I mean, are you the boss? And is this a work issue? If that's the case and they need to hear, then you may need to continue to have that conversation, and it may end up a conversation about the conversation. Hey, Joe, I've noticed I've tried to raise this issue on a number of occasions, but I'm not getting the result I'm looking for. So let's talk about the fact that I'm not seeing any change from what I'm been raising with you. And if change is not happening, we're going to move to a performance management discussion. Yeah. So that may be something that happens. But if it's a friend or a partner or a family member, and they're just not ready to hear that message, then maybe you just leave it. Maybe someone else might raise it with them and it might go in. Maybe you're not the one to give them that message. It's
a tough one, isn't it? And it goes to I think something you were saying earlier in the conversation. Often the people we work with, very often, are people that we actually like. And so to have a conversation with someone where they just don't agree, and it turns into perhaps a performance management conversation, that is a difficult conversation. And I think goes to many of the tips and techniques and advice that you gave us earlier in this conversation today. We're heading into finishing our session. We want to make sure that these are 50-minute sessions, and we'll try to close on time. So I'll close out with two other questions, if that's okay. So this is actually similar to, you were talking about this as an example earlier on. When you get cut off during a meeting, this happens frequently. So you're in the moment. It might be a little bit different to the example you were talking about earlier, where you're able to take your colleague out. It might be just you're in an important meeting. Maybe you don't know the people, maybe you do, but you have something to say and an important point to raise, but you get being cut off. What's the best way to approach that at that moment, at that point in time?
Two things you can do. At that point in time, I would just go again. So I'm speaking, you cut me off. I'm sorry, Bob, I haven't finished speaking. If you could just let me finish speaking, I'll come back to you in a moment. As I was saying, blah, 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 blah. Sorry, Bob, if you could just let me finish, I'll just take one moment and then I'll come to you, blah, 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 keep going. So in the moment, I would make sure you call it and keep going. So you're training people not to cut you off. But if that's not working, then I would enroll other people in those meetings to do that on your behalf. Because the more people going, Bob, hang on, I want to hear what Anneli has to say. Sorry, Anneli, continue. Oh, thanks, Cheryl. Thanks. Yep. The more they will get that message.
Yeah, okay. So you're talking really about getting champions to support you and in the meeting, yeah. And I guess also you can be a champion for other people as well.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I am sorry. This always happens. Quite a few questions have come in just at the last moment. I'm sorry we haven't been able to get to all of them, but I do want to make sure we close at the right time. We'll close out with this final question, if it's okay. How can we learn more about how to move beyond being the good girl or the quiet achiever? So many of us are quiet achievers. How do we move beyond that position of being a quiet achiever to better demonstrating our leadership potential?
Well, the really short answer would be attend my Women at Work program. I mean, in all seriousness, that's exactly what it's about. But to give you a really quick strategy right now, it would be think about your purpose and think about your value. If you're a good girl, you're doing the right thing to make people feel comfortable, but are you challenging the status quo to make the difference you were born to make? And if that's part of your mission, then do whatever it takes to have your voice heard.
Anneli, thank you so much. This has been such an instructive session, and I guess with all of these we could have gone on for another hour very easily, but we are coming into closing out the session. Before we leave, I want to invite everyone to take part in another poll question, and it's simply this: did you learn a new career or leadership skills in today's webinar? If you could enter in your results, we're very interested to see what you have to say, and we'll be taking note of your responses today. Thank you. We ask that particular question after every webcast because we want to stay very focused on providing and making sure that we provide practical advice when we invite you to invest 50 minutes in your future on the first Tuesday of every month. So your feedback's very important to us. Please respond to that poll question if you can. Next month we're going to talk about meaningful mentoring, and we'll be inviting applications for a new national mentoring program we're going to be running with Wisdom Learning. More on the mentoring program later, but in terms of the webinar, please mark the 3rd of May in your calendars as the next date. We'll also have details up about that online fairly soon, and you'll be able to register to attend. Thanks as always to the Commonwealth Government's Office for Women who support the webinars that we're delivering each month. As mentioned, we're going to be running these webinars every month for at least the next 2 years. So if you'd like to suggest a topic, please connect with us. You're able to suggest topics when you register online. You're also able to connect with us directly to suggest topics and things that you'd like to hear about. Please contact us via Facebook, LinkedIn, send us an email, or write your comments in the registration boxes on Eventbrite when you register. We'll be posting today's webinar on all our social media channels, so please, you're very welcome to share it with colleagues and friends. Thank you again to everyone for your participation today. I hope you and trust you found it worthwhile. I'm Catherine Carter, and I'll see you again next month.